I watched the Twin Towers fall on acid. Yo, what's up? It's someone that's no one, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report is coming from treportTA off Reddit, where he took LSD at a dose of 500 micrograms along with cannabis and tobacco. And here's the full report details. Alright, here we got quite the report. I got requested this a few years back now and had it on the back burner forever. I've just been doing a bunch of other stuff first, but this is possibly one of the most wild reports we've ever covered. Which you guys see the title, this happened during 9/11 in the city, where they watched the Twin Towers fall while on acid. Seeing that in itself was probably one hell of an experience, let alone to be on 500 micrograms of acid when it happened. There's many trippy qualities to what they see visually, but also what they feel. This is pretty intense, so I'll just let it speak for itself. I'm sure you guys will like this, so without further ado, let's dive right into it. Hey guys, been on here for a while, but don't post due to people at my job knowing my Reddit username. So I decided to create this throwaway to post some of my trip reports. This one in particular. It was an incredible difficult experience, and it's been nearly 2 decades. So I might come back and edit as I remember things, or to make it more coherent. But I'll try my best the first time around. P.S. Just finished writing it out. I apologize for the length, but I honestly don't think it's long enough to do the experience justice. Thanks in advance for taking the time to read it. This is the story of how I witnessed the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks while on LSD. For some background, I was 28 at the time, relatively healthy male, graduated from a well-known and respected university, and was working for a large aerospace defense company. My experience with drugs prior to this was pretty standard, including the usual marijuana, alcohol, cocaine, and a few classical psychedelics, as well as a variety of research chemicals that were starting to become a little more well known at the time. No habitual use of anything, and my psychedelic trips were spread out over about 13 years. This was probably around trip number 20 for me, about half of those being LSD. Set. Overall pretty happy. Had recently started an exciting new job. I was visiting some friends in Brooklyn for the week. No serious responsibilities hanging over my head. No stress at all. Ideal set. Setting. Friend's apartment in Brooklyn Heights. I dosed along with my friend, who will be named John, and our friend Tim was also present. Tim took either 400 or 600 milligrams of mescaline sulfate. John and I both took LSD. Both drugs were obtained from an extremely reliable source. There was no question about the identity of the chemicals. Those who were around the Berkeley area for 93 to 99 could probably make a very educated guess as to what was the source. I arrived in Brooklyn on Sunday, September 9th, 2001. I got in pretty late, and went to sleep soon after. We knew we were tripping the next day, so we wanted a good night's sleep in preparation. The next day, 9/10, was also mostly spent in preparation. It was Tim's first trip, and he wanted to do the whole 9 yards of preparing. Meditation, fruits and vegetables, exercise, you name it. It was a pretty nice day, and overall, very relaxing. We were planning to take our doses at 11 p.m. that night, which is something of a ritual for us. I've never been one to put that much into my pre-trip, but I was planning on taking a fairly large dose, so I joined him, as did John. The only other drug we ingested that day was marijuana. We all napped from about 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., then showered and did our final preparations. At 11 p.m. on September 10th, 2001, Tim took 2 200 milligram capsules of mescaline sulfate. John and I each took 2 125 microgram drops of liquid LSD, totaling 250 micrograms each. We both plan on taking more later on. I won't go into great depth for the first part of the trip, because that's not what was important about this trip. It went very smoothly. This acid was extremely clean. It may have been the quickest come up I've had to date. I had beams of energy shooting out of my knees within 20 minutes. By midnight, an hour after dosing, John and I were both flying, sketching out mock blueprints for ridiculous inventions. The main one that stuck with me was a toaster that butters your bread as it's toasted, resulting in optimal caramelization of the solids in the butter. At this point, Tim still wasn't feeling much of anything. This is to be expected with mescaline. Soon enough, he was violently retching in the bathroom, and John and I went up to the roof to give him some space, as well as to avoid having to hear his heaving. Sometime around 1, Tim stumbled onto the roof from the stairwell with the wildest grin on his face and the largest pupils I've ever seen. He was utterly astounded by the sheer beauty of what was happening. We tripped off the view of the Manhattan skyline for a while, and went back downstairs to listen to some music. Eventually, at around 6 a.m. on September 11th, our trip started to slow down a bit. John and I each took another 2 drops of LSD, equaling 250 micrograms and bringing our individual totals to 500 micrograms. Tim wanted a drop of acid too, but we dissuaded him and said that if he wanted to keep going, that he should take more mescaline. I gave him another 200 milligram capsule, but don't remember if he ended up taking it. At about 7:30 a.m. on September 11th, we really start to enter a new dimension. The feeling of coming up while coming down is incredibly strange and difficult to describe. It literally felt like being physically pulled in 2 directions, and each side was being pulled from opposite ends of the universe. We wandered up to the roof and lay down, staring at the sky. It was warm, beautifully sunny, and I felt as though I could feel the whole city waking up, getting ready to go to work, enjoying the sunshine and slight breeze. I felt a strong sense of community with millions of people I've never met. I felt that since we were all experiencing this beautiful day, we were all one entity, sharing this divine, orgasmic pleasure of sunshine and calm. This feeling was about to be shattered, totally annihilated, and replaced with the purest form of terror I have ever known or ever will know. Their apartment was in Brooklyn Heights, so being on the roof allowed for an incredible view of the Manhattan skyline, in particular, the downtown financial district area. For those of you unfamiliar with the area, we had a direct line of sight across the East River to the World Trade Center. Although we had plenty of time staring at it overnight, playing with the lights, and bouncing tracers around our fields of vision, we were now laying on our backs. Not much conversation was taking place, or at least not verbally. We all felt very calm and relaxed, or relatively so given the condition we were in. Then it happened. Boom! It was almost like a deep, rolling clap of thunder, but the sky was clear. We all jumped up, startled but not really scared. I couldn't articulate it at the time, but I think I thought it was just a transformer exploding. I said something like, I think that was the electric. Then I hear John say, "What the fuck?" I turn around, and there's a huge cloud of black smoke coming out of the North Tower. At the time, it was rippling purple and dark emerald green, creating all sorts of rapidly twisting and changing forms. Animals, geometric patterns, faces, you name it. We didn't know what to make of it. Among the 3 of us, there was this brief moment of disbelief. Considering the large doses of drugs we took, we all had to confirm with each other that what we were seeing was actually there. The idea of a transformer exploding was still bouncing around my head, and I think I suggested that maybe it was an electrical explosion. John suggested it might have been a bomb, given the fact that there had already been a bombing attempt. Tim and I both thought it was way too high up to have been a bomb. By now, several other people had come up onto the roof, and on the streets, there were clumps of people gathered at places where they could view the towers. I could instantly read and feel each individual's expression, from bewilderment to astonishment to fear. It was like flipping through a Rolodex of emotions. Suddenly, there was a commotion. People started pointing out towards the towers, as if something was happening. I looked up. and as soon as I did, the second plane came crashing through the south tower. It exploded out the other side in insanely vibrant oranges, reds, and yellows. I sort of went tunnel vision on the explosion. It became all-encompassing. I could almost feel the radiant heat, as if I was surrounded by the fireball. I began to comprehend what was happening, that this was no accident. This was an attack. The understanding of the situation came as a physical feeling. Throughout my whole body, I realized I had just watched at least dozens of people die, if not hundreds. Then the screams. This is the part that has stuck with me the most, and I will never forget this. Immediately after the second plane blew through the other side of the south tower, the screams erupted. I have never heard so many people scream at once. It was as if the entire city was screaming in unison. Most of the surrounding rooftops were filled with people, as were the streets below. They all screamed. It pierced my very soul. It caused physical pain as the screams became one, warping and modulating, and expanding across the galaxy. Every living being screamed at that moment. An image flashed in my head of a shadowy figure with a sort of mad scientist aesthetic, pushing a dropper vial. In the vial was pure, distilled terror. That's what I was hearing. There was no more amazement, no more questioning of what was happening, not even confusion, just pure terror. When I came out of this state, all I could hear was sirens and sobbing. Everyone who wasn't silent, mouth agape, was crying. Tim, John, and I said nothing. We just exchanged looks of disbelief. None of us could articulate a thing at that moment, but it was clear to each of us that we had all just witnessed an event of immense impact and importance. None of us said a word. We just stood and watched the towers burn. The massive cloud of smoke expanding across the horizon, taking on all types of evil, twisted shapes. This was the most awful thing we have ever witnessed, without a doubt, until an hour later. It felt like eons had passed since we saw the second point hit. But at around 10 a.m., the south tower, the one we watched absorb a plane and spit it out the opposite side in a ball of flames, collapsed. Again, the screams. This was beyond all comprehension. We watched that building turn to dust before our very eyes. This massive structure of concrete and steel, just gone within seconds. 1 minute it was there. The next minute it was tumbling, crystallizing, and then shattering, and crystallizing, and then shattering hundreds of times as it went. It was clear that if there was still anyone inside, they were now dead beyond a doubt. This was too much for me. I started to vomit, but there was nothing in my stomach, so I just dry heaved on the roof, screaming between retches. I began to question all reality, my mind trying to deny that this could ever happen, that it must be the drug. Please, let it just be the drug. But it just kept getting worse. I started to tumble into a void of terror and confusion, beginning to lose all touch with reality. The words, why, and what, flew around my head, repeating over and over. Then the screams started again. I get up from all fours and watch as the north tower follows the other's path. This one appeared to me more like a crumbling marble, glittering white and crumbling into billions of pieces, as if watching a marble temple age tens of thousands of years within seconds. I don't remember much after that. I have a few short flashes from the rest of the day. We mostly just sat around inside in total silence, smoking cigarettes and occasionally crying. We didn't know about the other attacks until later that afternoon, and then we watched the coverage of Building 7 collapsing. This was without a doubt the single most terrifying, terrible day of my life. I'm struggling for words to describe it, but it's impossible. The psychedelic experience in and of itself is impossible to describe, let alone witnessing something so traumatic, transformative, and historical. I'm gonna wrap this up now, as it's been incredibly difficult to write. I may come back and edit this at some point, but I'm not ready yet. This has been the first time I've ever written about this experience in detail, and although it was hard, I think it has been beneficial to me.